What is up, y'all? Odeed here once again, and welcome to volume 3 of my backyard barbecue basics. So today we're going to get into something that a lot of people want to cook. We are going to take a pork butt and we're going to make pulled pork. So I have about a 6-pound pork butt right here. By the way, when it comes to pork butt, it's not actually from the pig's rear, it is actually from the shoulder, and there are 2 separate parts of the shoulder. So there's the pork butt, or the blade roast as some people call it, and then there's the picnic or the ham part of the shoulder. You want to get the pork butt or the blade roast part for making pulled pork. So what we're going to try to do here is trim this thing up first, and then we'll go ahead and marinate it after that. All right, so here's what it looks like up close, and you don't necessarily have to do this. You could just put some rub on it, throw it on the smoker this way, but there's a couple like fat sections here, or fat parts that I want to kind of cut out, just because they probably won't render out when we cook it. Also, one thing to note, most of these should have a fat cap on the bottom, and you kind of want to cut this fat cap down to about 1/4 of an inch if you can, but leave it on, especially if you have your heat source coming from the bottom of your cooker, and you will cook it fat side down. That way this kind of acts as like a protective coat against the heat. All right, so as you can see, we did a little bit of trimming. We didn't hack away too much. I think this thing's pretty much ready to go now. The next step we're gonna do is we're gonna put some rub on it. There are different ways at this point that you can marinate your pork butt. You could inject it, put a mustard slather on it, and then rub it down. But since this is backyard barbecue basics, we are just gonna put rub on it, and that's it. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and throw some rub on. Basically, just go to the store and get any pork rub that's sitting there on the shelf. You don't need anything too fancy, or if you have some kind of pork rub already in your pantry, go ahead and grab it and just liberally apply it to the meat. Okay, literally that's all you gotta do at this point. Put it in a foil pan, put some foil on top of it, or you can just wrap it in foil at this point and put it in your fridge and let it sit in your fridge overnight, and we'll come back tomorrow and we'll throw it on the smoker. All right, y'all, it is the next day. It's about 10:30 in the morning. I got the pellet smoker fired up here at 250 degrees. You can use whatever kind of smoker that you have in your backyard. Just try to get your temperature right around 250. So as I mentioned, 10:30 in the morning. I want this done around 4 or 5 o'clock. I'm guessing it'll take about 6 hours to cook. So let's go ahead and open up the smoker here, and I'll show you how I have it set up. So here on the bottom rack, I have a water pan, and I have this pan here for 2 different reasons. Number one, if you put your meat on the top rack, you're going to get more kind of heat circulation around the meat and more smoke penetration all around the meat as well. And then with the pan on the bottom, you can catch all the drippings, so it'll be easier to clean up. I've also put water here in this pan. That way the water kind of evaporates. It keeps the inside of the smoker kind of moist, and you won't have to baste your meat. Also cooking at 250, it's a little hotter than 225. Hopefully the fat will render off real nice and roll off the top and the sides here and kind of baste the meat as it cooks. So let's go ahead and shut the lid. And at this point, do not open the lid, do not mess with it, because if you're looking, you're not cooking. Another thing I should mention, you probably saw, is I have a meat probe in the thickest part of the meat. That way I'm checking the meat's temperature all the time with a remote. I basically have a Thermoworks Smoke. I will put a link in the description so you can get yourself one, as I personally think they're vital. And right now what we're gonna do is we're gonna watch that Thermoworks Smoke, and when we get up to a temperature of 160 degrees on this meat, which should be in about 3 or 4 hours, I'll show you guys what we're gonna do next. All right, y'all, it's been 4.5 hours and we're sitting right at that 160 mark. So let's go ahead, open up the smoker and see what it looks like. Let's take a look here. Oh yeah, it's looking nice. Look at that, nice color. The fat has rendered off nicely. It is nice and juicy. And once again, this is with no basting. I've had the lid closed the entire time. No spritz or nothing. Check it out, the crust is set, meaning the rub will not come off. We got the color that we want. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and put this in a foil pan, obviously a different foil pan from this foil pan, a clean foil pan. Wrap it in foil, and then we will take it up to an internal temperature of 190 and then start checking it for tenderness. Also, one thing I should mention, I'm going to take the top rack out now and I'm going to remove this foil pan here and put the pork butt on the bottom rack. That way it kind of speeds the cooking up a little bit, and also at this point we don't need this foil pan down here for any kind of moisture or for fat drippings. So you can just discard this completely. By the way, when you're doing this, use some kind of protection. I have cotton gloves under here with just like some rubber gloves over the top. Alright, close the lid up. Basically what we're going to do now is we're going to let it cook into an internal temperature of 190, and then we'll start checking it for tenderness. So once again, don't open the lid, and we'll be back when the temperature probe lets us know the internal temperature. Alright y'all, it is exactly 6 hours in, and we have hit the 190 mark on the internal temperature on the pork butt. Let's go ahead and check it for tenderness now. Oh yeah, look at that. Very nice. So the best way to check this for tenderness, just take this probe here and just probe it. I'm gonna go ahead and call that done. Wrap this up, and then you're gonna let it rest for at least an hour. I like to do it an hour if I can. You can do it for up to 2 probably. Anything longer than an hour and a half, I would wrap this in like a beach towel or something like that, and then just let it rest on your counter. But basically, if you want it to sit any longer than like 2.5 hours, I would put it in a cooler, wrapped like this, and then wrapped in the towel, stick it in the cooler, and you could probably leave it in the cooler for 3 to 4 hours, and it'll be good. All right, y'all, once again, quick recap. 6 hours on the smoker at 250 degrees, total cooking time. Once it reached 160 internal, we put it in a foil pan, wrapped it in foil, took it up to 190, checked it for tenderness. I liked where it was at as far as the tenderness goes. Took it off, let it rest on the counter, wrapped in a towel for 1 hour, and now let's pull into it. I have these insulated gloves here that you can use. I will also put a link in the description on where you can get these. Oh yeah, check it out. Looking very good. First thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna flip it over. We're gonna get rid of the fat here that didn't render off, because that you do not want to eat. All right, now that we've done that, this should just pull apart. What I'm gonna do is separate it over here into this other pan. That way if there's any fat or anything like that, I can get it out. Also, one thing I will say is you can overcook this pork, and if you do overcook this pork, it'll probably get mushy, so just be mindful of that. And you might have like some silver skin and whatnot on here. Fat pockets you gotta get rid of. Be really careful with that liquid, it is hot. Usually a pretty good sign right there, got a pretty clean bone. All right, it is all pulled, and the last thing we're gonna do is, you see this kind of au jus here that collected on the bottom of the pan. We're gonna pour a little bit of it just over the top of the pork and kind of mix it in to give it a little bit of extra flavor. I would not pour this entire thing over the top of this because it will make it mushy, but you do wanna add just a little bit more flavor. All right, so there we have it, folks. This is the finished product. I took a little taste when I wasn't filming, and let me tell you, it is amazing. It is juicy, it is succulent, it's got nice flavor on the bark. You got that nice rendered off fat flavor. You can see the smoke ring in there. So yeah, as you can see, it really is just this easy to make some nice pulled pork. My name is Odeed, and thank you for watching Backyard Barbecue Basics Volume 3.